then invited us to the country outpost. And so we went out to that outpost, and that really worked really well with us. The cities are to be worked from outposts, said the messenger of God. Shall not the cities be warned? Yes, but not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. And so if we're going to be successful evangelizing the city from an outpost, we probably just don't want to be too far away, because if we're an hour, if we're far away, the further you are, the less likely you are to come down to the city. I've seen some outposts. I visited some outposts that were really out. They were outposts. Okay, so it took hours to get there down roads, and GPS isn't working, can't find it, and it's getting lost down gravel roads. And I thought, no one's going to find this place. So okay. Well, that's nice. Well, you can think, well, I want to be protected in the last days, and I want safety, and I want this, and I want that. And, but isn't that kind of self-focused, So we're here for a mission, so we shouldn't be too far away. Otherwise, we'll lose our influence. Did you have a... Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the case in that one, but it could, yeah. If there's a community there, yeah, sure. You're right. Yeah, that's right. So maybe there's different kinds of outposts. As long as there's a mission focus and there's a population around there to work, really important. Okay, yeah. And so health, family, morality, character development, all of this. Just one last aspect before we move on is the warning of the impending destruction on the cities, okay, which is something that just is taking place even right now, right? I mean, examples of, the main cities living on the coast, there's a warning for that. So Tampa, right on the coast there, hit really hard, and so, I mean, that's, the city just shuts down. It's this kind of thing is going to be more prevalent. Out of the cities is the message the Lord has been giving me. Earthquakes will come, floods will come, and we are not to establish ourselves in the wicked cities where the enemy is served in every way and where God is so often forgotten. So this is another reason, right? There's just more, disasters bring a lot of confusion and panic, and cities will become can be very dangerous in those environments. We even saw where cities can be shut off, okay, where you're kind of trapped in there, and there's food shortages, and it's just concrete everywhere, and there's no food. The grocery stores are emptied of food within, a few hours. The supplies are not there. It's just not a safe environment, especially in the last days. The Lord desires that we shall have clear spiritual eyesight. We must be quick to discern the peril that would attend the establishment of institutions in these wicked cities. We must make wise plans to warn these cities and at the same time live where we can shield our children and ourselves from the contaminating and demoralizing influences so prevalent in these places. The time is near when large cities will be swept away, and all should be warned of these coming judgments. Oh, that God's people had a sense of the impending destruction of thousands of cities now almost given to idolatry. So the country place is a more safe place too, especially in this day and age. And the closer we get to Jesus coming, the more pestilence, the more natural disasters, the more trouble and economic trouble and so forth to the cities. It's just going to not be places to be at. So you'd think, well, I want to get as far away as possible. So we need to be out, but we need to be still reaching them. And a little distance, a few miles of distance, or 10, 20 miles, maybe 30 miles or so of distance. We can look at that distance later, but can make a big difference. Okay. The spiritual growth, just another point on that. We say again, out of the cities. Now, do not consider it a great deprivation that you must go into the hills and mountains. So she points this out a couple times. She's saying, well, a lot of people from the country, I mean, in the U.S. in the 19th century, before the Industrial Revolution, most people were living in the country. They're living on farms. And they wanted to go into the city for all the luxuries. But now the message was coming, come out. And people were complaining about this, saying, well, I don't want to, it's hard out there. How am I going to go back to the country and, live there? She said, don't consider that like you're being deprived. Okay. It is a blessing for you to get out of that city and back into the country, even though it's not easy. And especially, back then they didn't have all of the, the same kind of tools and machinery and things that we have today. It was not easy. It was a lot of work, but there was an urging of to not see it as a curse by God that we have to go back out to the country, to the farm. But it's a real blessing. It's exactly what we need. I urge our people to make their life work to seek spirituality. Christ is at the door. This is why I say to our people, do not consider it a privation when you are called to leave the cities and move out to the country places. Here there await rich blessings for those who will grasp them by beholding the scenes of nature, the works of the Creator. By studying God's handiwork imperceptibly, you will be changed into the same image. God's character is impressed in the nature all around us. And when you're just living there, you don't even have to do anything else but be there, your character gets molded and changed. I even noticed, I think God was even working on my heart before I ever, knew Him or met Seventh-day Adventists. I always felt like when I was in nature, it was just so much more calming, and it was very attractive, to me just to be out in nature. And I noticed that it would change me. And when I'd come back, sometimes I'd go on long backpacking trips, and when we'd come back to the city, it was like it took a mental adjustment. It's like, wow, things are a lot different. The more you're in the country, you realize you don't always see it. That's why she says it's imperceptible. But when you come out from the country and you're back into the city, you look around, you're like, wow, it's almost like a culture shock. That's that imperceptible change that God is making. Another observation, just from my backpacking days, meeting people on the trail. I met people from all over the world on trails, and they were always so kind. I never had that experience in the city, hanging out in Chicago, downtown. Even asking someone for the time back then, they would just walk right by you, Cities harden people. Nature softens people. And it softens their character, and it makes us more like Jesus. So just being there, that's like the first step. You don't have to do much. Just have your kids there. The children, their characters, God will develop their characters and ours just by being there. Praise the Lord. Okay, so easy access. Now we're going to be talking about the importance of being. We've already talked about the importance of being out. Okay, great. But now we need to be close too. So there's like this kind of tension of being out, but also close. So there's like this balance of trying to know like how far out we should be. So let's just look a little counsel on that. From 1909, a period of time, we're going to be looking at this. From 1900 to 1909, the Seventh-day Adventist Church was starting outpost centers all over the United States. It was just a boom of outpost centers. It was really, really impressive. And it was the denomination leading out most of it. And then you saw this emergence of the supporting ministries coming out of this decade as well. A very powerful decade, 1900 to 1909. So there was a lot of counsel around this time period. And so this is counseling us, let men of sound judgment be appointed, not to publish abroad their intentions, but to search for such properties in the rural districts, in easy access to the cities, suitable for the small training schools for workers, and where facilities may be provided for treating the sick and weary souls who know not the truth. Look for such places, notice, just out from the large cities, where suitable buildings may be secured. So there's two phrases there we need to notice. Easy access, okay, that's a principle. Easy access and also just out. So we have this picture of being outside in the country, but not too far out, because we have a mission to do, and we don't want to make it hard for people to get out to us, and we don't want to make it hard for us to get in there regularly to do our ministry work. And God will lead us to properties, and God will help us find affordable properties, and some will be even granted as gifts. But please, again, there's this repeated, do not build in the cities. But more important, so more important than the magnificent scenery. So this is in a testimony where she's explaining how beautiful this outpost center was, that trees and all is so great in the country, but more important than all of the beauty of the environment, the beautiful buildings, the spacious grounds, more important is the close proximity of these institutions to densely populated districts. I don't think she's saying, we got to go to the highways and hedges too, okay? But the cities need to be warned. There's dense populations there, so largely, when we started, we were looking at the big cities. Okay, how are we going to reach Los Angeles? How are we going to reach San Francisco? How are we going to reach Washington, D.C.? How are we going to reach Nashville? Those are what came into the mind, and that's where God maybe was directing us to start with. But we also got to go to the highways and hedges, understand. But it's very important. While the beauty is important, and we can benefit from, but we have to be close, in close proximity to densely populated districts. And the opportunity thus afforded of communicating to many, many people a knowledge of the third angel's message, we are to have a clear spiritual discernment, or else we shall fail of understanding the opening providences of God that are preparing the way for us to lighten the world. The great crisis is before us. Now is the time for us to sound the warning message by the agencies that God has given us for this purpose. Let us remember that one of the most important agencies is our medical missionary work. We are never to lose sight of the great object for which our sanitariums are established, the advancement of God's closing work in the earth. So the sanitarium work, or the lifestyle wellness center work, these health centers were to be located in these outpost centers around these city centers around the world, and there was a plan to have one over outside of every city in the world. How are we doing on that? Have we lost a vision for that plan? What if there was a beautiful country property with flowers and landscaping, just a great facility outside of every single city, major city of the world? Houston, Dallas, Chicago, go on. When we have some, Denver and some places, but a lot of them have closed. Where's the one for New York? Where's the one for Boston? They're not there anymore. So now I'm going to get into some of those specifics here on some of the places. These are just some interesting. This is during that time period, 1905. A lot of these outpost centers were getting started through the encouragement and direction by the testimonies. We thank the Lord that we have a good sanitarium at Paradise Valley, 7 miles from San Diego. That would have been a nice one to work at. 7 miles outside of, and that's still there. That property is still there, but it's now in San Diego, right? 7 miles worked for a while, but the cities grew around, and that's what happened to a lot of them, unfortunately. And there's a sanitarium there at Glendale, 8 miles from Los Angeles, and a large and beautiful place at Loma Linda, 62 miles east from Los Angeles. So Loma Linda wasn't the outpost for Los Angeles. Loma Linda was the outpost for Redlands, Riverside, and San Bernardino. It was Glendale was the outpost for Los Angeles. So they were like any serious center of population, they wanted to have one there. The Loma Linda property is one of the most beautiful sanitarium sites I have ever seen. I wonder what that looked like. You go there today. I don't know. It doesn't look that way now. Things have changed. But this is just some of the emphasis. Loma Linda is in the midst of a very rich district, including 3 important cities. That was listed in the last one: Redlands, Riverside, San Bernardino. This field must be worked from Loma Linda, just as, notice, Boston must be worked from Melrose. So Melrose was an outpost sanitarium outside of Boston, which if you look, I had to look to see where Melrose now is in Boston. So it's another example. It's interesting history because that sanitarium first started in South Lancaster, which was about 45 miles outside of Boston, but that's pretty far. So through the council, through the testimonies, it got moved closer to Boston, to Melrose, where it was very close, like 8 miles, 7 miles from Boston. And it was a great place, great ministry, but now it's in the city. Okay. So,
no cars then, right? So 8 miles.
Yeah, I mean, on horse and buggy, that was, how fast can you go on a horse and buggy? On not, and this isn't on asphalt, kunk, 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 So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it would take some time. So easy access would be, yeah. And if you're trying to bring someone ill, someone sick in a buggy down a bumpy road, you can just imagine, 45 miles. That's that's a journey. I mean, that's a long journey. So there's different perspectives. I think we can, relate to some of these in today's terms, but close proximity, easy to get to, are the principles there. The Melrose property, which is the one out just north of Boston, is such that conveniences can be provided that will draw to that sanitarium persons not of our faith. I like this statement here because it says, the aristocratic as well as the common people will visit that institution to avail themselves of the advantages offered for restoration of health. Beautiful nature, you will draw all different kinds of people. The elite of society from Boston with all these high institutes of high learning and business there, so they'll come. They'll be drawn to it because they don't get that in Boston. They'll want to come out to your place and they'll realize the advantages of refreshing themselves out in nature and eating great food, and just as well as the common person would. So the purpose of the outposts should be something that will attract the attention, that would be drawing interest. They see it as, hey, there's a sanctuary just outside here. I need to go there and refresh myself. I need to go there for healing, for multiple reasons. The high and the low classes. I was surprised when, in speaking of the work they wish to do in the South, that means now this area, they spoke of establishing a school in some place a long way from Nashville. Ellen White was surprised, and this was actually E.A. Sutherland and Percy McGann, who we love and respect, but they didn't have the right idea. That shows there was human wisdom there. They go, yeah, we need to just get out, way out in the Cumberland plateaus, out kind of away from everything. Well, they got redirected on that. From the light given me, I knew that this would not be the right thing to do, and I told them so. She wasn't shy. The work that these brethren, Sutherland and McGann, can do, because of the experience gained at Berrien Springs, is to be carried on within easy access of Nashville. For Nashville has not been worked yet as it should be. So there's a lot of attention that need to be given to Nashville, and the Madison School needed to be close enough that it could minister to Nashville. If it gets too far away, they could work in in those rural areas with some neighbors and so forth, but not to the extent that God wanted it to be done. So Sutherland and McGann got redirected to that property just outside of Nashville. So we'll just look at some of the early 20th century growth of Outposts, whether it's supporting ministry or not. Most of these are not. St. Helena was one of the later ones. They're north of San Francisco. I don't really think it was so much of a outpost to San Francisco. It was that area, St. Helena, and there's another city west of that sanitarium. I think it was more reaching that area, because Mountain View was really the place, the outpost from San Francisco was just south of San Francisco, much closer than St. Helena. Paradise Valley there, San Diego, Loma Linda, the Redlands area, Huntsville had its outpost. Nashville, and Nashville had an outpost in addition to Madison. Madison wasn't the only. There was also another more church-run outpost to Madison in a different part of town. So they were like, I mean, the vision, it wasn't just one place. We're far behind on even having one good outpost outside of all these cities. But I mean, ideally, there's even more than one, and there's just a lot of attention, a lot of activity, because these cities have a lot of people in them. We got to reach them. So you have Madison as well. Melrose started a little bit earlier. That's the one outside of Boston, 1902. Then, of course, Berrien Springs, which E.A. Sutherland established that outpost in 1901 when the school was moved out to Berrien Springs from Battle Creek. Then you have Tacoma Park, which was that should say Washington, D.C. About 1904, you've got Tacoma Park, which is an outpost. Right? So remember, as far as possible. So that was counsel for the Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah. So the church was heeding to it to an extent and was building a lot of these places. So I'm just, Ellen White passed away in 1915. So in those last years, she was living in the U.S. for those 15 years, especially these 10. She was more active than the last 5. So for 10 years, she really put her energies into encouraging the church. God wanted her to do that. He strengthened her to give these messages. So let me just ask you, I mean, with the attention of the church to minister to these cities in this way, what do you think God's plan was? I mean, because if you look at most of them, the city grew up to them or grew around them. Okay, so what was God thinking? Did God make a mistake for these properties? Now, a lot of them were clearly given by vision and inspiration. Okay, so of course Jesus has wanted to return already, and so time is getting delayed. So what solution might we find here? I mean, what do you think God had in mind here? Because how many more have there been? At least, these are these are church institutions. Where did that spirit go? Where did that interest go? I mean, they even moved. They started a place in South Lancaster. And like, no, this isn't perfect. Let's get in Melrose. Boom. Then they moved over to Melrose. So when the city grew up to Melrose, what do you think? What do you think I would want to have happen then? Yeah, that property is more expensive now, right? Okay, so maybe they should move back. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that South Lancaster property is still available. I mean, today South Lancaster, 40 miles from Boston, is probably not so bad, right? I mean, you could zip there and get away because Boston's a big. I mean, someone to spend several days or a week or 2 weeks. I mean, to drive 40 minutes is not a big deal at all. So we have to adjust to the situation. And I think there needed to be more adjustment. And I don't know the answer for Southern California, because Southern California has just gotten crazy. But where do you go? But that should be a study, right? I mean, this is so important. Like we're going to fail in our mission if these institutions are located in the city. Well, if the city is now growing around that place, we have to adjust, right? So we should sell it off. That's what I would think. It's like, well, sell it and buy a bigger country property. I mean, you could even have more resources to it. But somewhere along the line here, we've settled, and most of these beautiful sanitariums from those days with flowers and trees and birds, they are hospitals now in the middle of the city. Yeah, I mean, Paradise Valley is a hospital there in San Diego, and we have Loma Linda there, and they're on St. Helena and so forth. So it's a different thing, but we have to come back to the councils, right, and realize like what's the best, where are we going to be most effective here? Are we fulfilling God's plan and God's vision? So of course, a very important one on this list is the one established there in Madison, and so it's a unique one on the list for the reason that was not owned by the church. Okay. So that was a new animal. Like the church is not used to that. Like what do you mean that we're not going to own it? Like that was a very difficult thing for the brethren to wrap their minds around. Like what is self-supporting, and we're used to everything being owned by the church. So yeah, so why would God do that? Well, interestingly, I have the statement, actually not in this presentation, but there was not always a lot of support for what was going on at the Madison School. And so even though the Southern Union president, George Butler, was on their board of directors, even though S.N. Haskell from the GC was on the board of directors, Ellen White was on the board of directors, 3 high officials in the are respected in the church, but there were still questions and confusion around it. And in one of the statements, she says, "Well, the evidence that a lot of people are not supporting this work gives the reason why this one is not owned by the church. Because if it was, we can see what you would do with it." So she spoke very plain on that point, that There's a reason, okay? Because it protects the vision and the longevity of that project. Okay? So now there is a board of directors established that could serve for many years, and they can choose people that have a vision for that work and believe in that work, and the board of directors protects that work and guides that work under the direction of God. And she said, God will lead them, and God will bless them, and God will direct them. But she doesn't now, this is my own words, she doesn't get into these specifics, but I've seen from experience, sometimes when the church owns a property, they can also, I mean, this is great. I mean, it's great that they were doing this work, and we want the church leadership to continue. That'd be wonderful. It's nothing against them doing it. It's great. But a lot of times what happens is that new leaders come. Church leaders are changing all the time. Every 3, 4, 5 years, there's new leaders coming in. And during that 5-year period, a new leader can come and say, I don't understand this work that they're doing out in the country here. We need a youth camp, and just kind of shut it all down. Actually, this happened recently. I know an institution that worked really hard for about 4 years to establish this great work that was going on. They had a mission school, they had a wellness center and everything. And the church president told everyone they needed to get off the campus within 30 days. And so it's like, well, we just spent our lives trying to build this, and there was issues there. I mean, they could have done it better, and there were some financial issues and so forth. So it's not
church property.
Yeah, it was church property, so they could do that, and so they've made it into something else, and everyone's gone. So that could happen. Imagine over 100 years. You think there's a chance that could happen? So that's why a lot of people that donate, a lot of donors, that's not me. People with a lot of money, they're hesitant to give to those kind of properties owned by the church because they know it's unstable in some respects. Okay, so they look for the supporting ministries because they know if they know the people, there's a solid board, and that board protects that ministry and is able to kind of make sure of its longevity. Okay, so it's that way that board is being composed of people that believe in that work, rather than being composed by elected, church leaders, pastors that may or may not have a vision for that work, right? So there's a little bit more security. But also it's a blessing for the church too, because it lessens their liability. They don't have to worry about it now, right? I mean, there's a separation there. I mean, there shouldn't be lawsuits that could affect the church. I know they need to care for that, but they don't have to, if it's losing money, they don't have to be dishing money into it. So self-supporting work is a blessing because it fosters a spirit of, a self-reliance or reliance on God. Like, we got to make it because no one's going to cover us. We can't just ask the church, hey, we're short on stipends this month. Can you send $20,000 to help us? That's just not going to happen. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I came in 1972, so I'm old. And the self-supporting term was coined by Ellen White.
Yeah.
We changed it.
Mm-hmm.
So that a lot of people in self-supporting work don't understand that we were called self-supporting because we weren't going to depend on the conference to help us. That's why she coined the term.
Yeah, right.
And now we've changed it to supporting ministries.
Supporting ministries, yeah.
A lot of us old folks had a problem with.
Yeah.
Because the younger people don't understand the whole premise of self-supporting was to start a ministry that was not every ministry that could be started could the conference support. So Sister White thought, let's have ministries that support themselves. They were supposed to have trades and be practical.
Yeah.
And, so we lost the vision. I mean, it wasn't like protecting from the conference. Self-supporting workers kind of lost the vision also by, ASI used to be self-supporting ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's conference and everybody.
But have you really seen examples where the church is supporting any of these supporting ministries?
I'm just saying we need to understand that it's us that support ourselves.
Yeah.
That
for
was
sure.
The premise.
Yeah.
The church wasn't supposed to have to support us.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
they don't have to, and they don't.
Yeah.
So you're going to realize it really quick.
Yeah, right.
And
so we have to have a skill, a trade.
Yeah.
And when we get a ministry,
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah, there's got to
the
be.
whole premise,
That's right. Yeah, there's got to be some business involved,
right.
some income, or yeah. And I don't think
Donation.
it's okay to get donations, but yeah, I don't think any of these projects. The idea was that they survive on donations, right? So yeah, thank you for that. You're absolutely right. So yeah, the supporting ministries term is just helping. We've gone through some bumps in the road.
We lost the vision of self-supporting in some of it.
Yeah, yeah, that could be. So we need to keep talking about it. And I don't think we should be shy of using the term self-supporting. I mentioned the term a lot, but not when I'm visiting the church brethren.
Right.
We're here a supporting ministry. We're here to help you.
Young people need to know we have the skills to support our own ministry.
Yeah,
We can't just go out and ask for donations only.
you're right. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, yeah, amen. Yes.
I think too, with the cost of things and the way the world's going, that, every home that has a spare bedroom could be an Outpost center.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You make
Yeah, sure.
your home into a lifestyle center, even if it's small. You have one patient come in
Mm-hmm.
every
Yeah.
week or whatever, your neighbors
Yeah.
or however.
Right.
I mean, the medical missionary work is the ending work
Right.
and the entering wedge to these end times. So
That's right.
we can't just look at maybe
Right.
building a place like Wildwood or
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. So thank you for bringing that up. Great. So let me just say, one thing, any big institution that I know the history didn't start that way in almost no case, especially Wildwood. In the beginning of Wildwood, it was real humble, right, Grandma Jean? And by the way, those that don't know Jean Atherton here, Jean Atherton is 102 years old and is one of the pioneers of this institution. And we're so glad that you're attending this OCI convention, Grandma. We love you very much. So her husband built this lifestyle center here in the late 60s. So of course, with a lot of help. But Wildwood started small in a humble little house. Okay. Yeah. There was no interstate. This was in the interstate system started. The concept started in the 50s, and I think they got here with Interstate 24 like in the 60s. And so Wildwood was bought in 1940. Well, it was actually bought in like 38, but the institution started in 42. And so, yeah, it was more country back then, but it was small, to the point. And I also wanted to say, Ellen White gave this idea that our families should have a room available for guests and so forth. That counsel has not really been heeded too well. And it's like the world is kind of like almost kicked us with the Airbnb thing. It's like, hello, that Airbnb is like a perfect, it's like, wow, you could now, pitch your house as an Airbnb, because there's different styles now of Airbnb. There's different, you try to become a little different. And so we could have, what if Adventists had these Airbnbs that were health related, and so there's something special there. There's something you could learn. There's some spa stuff going on, or some vegan food provided, or, it'd be like a big attraction. So anyway, yeah, that's absolutely really true. Then, and rather than start establishing big institutions, I know there's, we're getting close to the end, but maybe many, hundreds of Adventists around the world just open their homes. But I don't think that's, when we say that kind of thing, though, part of me thinks, well, no one ever starts a big institution. It always starts small. I mean, Wildwood didn't get this big over even 20 years. It was, 30 and now 80 years. So they start small, and you grow. Very, very rarely does God just give you a key of the hand of his big property and you just walk in and, start a big ministry. You don't go around raising, hey, I want to start a wellness center. I'm raising $8 million. Would anyone like to help me? I've got this whole plan, buildings and dormitories. Anyone want to give $8 million to that? It's not going to happen. So God doesn't allow that. Yeah, right. 8 million. I don't know what it would even get you. So yeah, you're not going to build this place for 8 million. So that doesn't happen unless it's a miracle. I think I've seen God's plan start small, and you learn. I think Lee even mentioned that. It's right. You learn through the growth. You grow into it, because if you start too big, you could collapse, because it's kind of too heavy. and there's too much overhead. There's too much expenses suddenly managing a huge place like this. You kind of got to grow into it. So yeah, Heather.
A lot of the reason Tennessee has so many places is because of Madison.
Oh yes.
I mean, the nursing homes that were lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
centers, a lot of the academies,
Mm-hmm.
they went out and the students went out and started all kinds of places closed.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's why Tennessee, people are like, why so many places in Tennessee? It's the
Yeah.
satellites.
Didn't used to be that way.
And
Yeah.
now schools, people want to be health educators. That's not necessarily what medical missionary work all it is.
Sure.
They went out and they did all kinds of things.
Yes.
Schools,
Right.
from Madison.
Right.
Too bad it closed.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's some lessons to learn from it. And yeah, good segue. We can talk a little bit more in detail of the Madison School, because Madison became a template that could be easily replicated. Of course, the church had its other sanitariums that could be replicated and worked on, but this was a new model that could be replicated by lay people. And Ellen White sat on that board because she knew that there would be questions about it, and why isn't the church owning it and running it and everything? And so she said, no, God is in this work, because lay people need to take that responsibility. They need to take that liability. They need to invest themselves in it and do this work under the direction of God, and don't just let them do it, don't stand in their way. So Madison had a purpose. So I just wanted to talk about the purpose of the Madison School, because it was one of the key outposts, and there were reasons why it was established. And one of those is that, and so this is looking at the role of the Outpost Center work. So Madison was a place, from pamphlet 12, it says, a place where teachers and medical missionaries may be trained to carry the gospel to the world. And there's another additional statement here. The class of education given at the Madison School is such as will be accounted a great treasure, a treasure of great value to those who take up missionary work in foreign fields. So it was to help train people for overseas work. If many more in other schools were receiving a similar training, we as a people would become a spectacle to the world, to angels and to men. The message would be quickly carried to every country, and souls now in darkness would be brought to the light. So there's no boundaries to this method. Lay people can just go and start up a ministry, and by the direction of God, start working for him. And places like Madison would train more people to go out, that would go start more places to train more people, and it would spread around the world, and all these cities would be getting worked, and Jesus would come very soon. This is a really important part of the remnant church's work of finishing the gospel. And now we're to the point, I know the church, oh, what time is it here? Oh yeah, okay, we got more time. I know the church is interested, and we have a great health department at the General Conference, and they, bless their heart, had a goal for 500 lifestyle centers around the world to be established. That's been hard, okay? They haven't reached that goal, but they know that it's important, okay? But it's like we've gotten so far kind of behind, and the culture, Adventist culture, has kind of gotten such a different mindset that it's hard to like know where to start now, okay? Because it's different. Mostly we're running hospitals and clinics in the cities. There's, aside from some exceptions, I've seen some in Brazil that are lifestyle centers run by the church, and that's a blessing. But it's very small examples like that. This example would be, let the lay people follow a model, follow a template, and the training that they get at this home base here in Tennessee, Madison, would prepare them to go start these other projects around the world. And the whole, we'd be like finishing the gospel work. Definitely not saying that this is the only way to work. Literature and other branches of work are equally important and very important, but this is one really big emphasis. A place where students should be trained to establish small mission schools. And in that statement, she's really talking about family mission schools and like little church schools. And that's what Madison was really strong at. Madison had lots of graduates going out all around Tennessee starting church schools. And those schools were bringing community children to them. and those community children were trained by them, and many of them became Seventh-day Adventists. So these little schools having a big impact. I think in Honduras, Jose Suazo started Vida Internacional to witness to this region where there were no Seventh-day Adventists, and now he started at a grade school there. It's powerful. Now he's training all these children from this little village of El Ciutal, and it's having a huge impact. And I think he's doing well to follow Madison's model in that. Madison was doing a lot of elementary education. Yeah.
The schools now are a little more complicated to open. Would daycares be something like that, do you think? Daycare
Well,
centers?
I think it can be, sure. Yeah, I mean, that's up to a
Because
certain
you
age,
wouldn't have
but
all the, the things that you would have, legislation,
yeah. Well, at least now we have like ISE, which can provide accreditation for schools. So I think through ISE, we're all of the supporting, all the self-supporting schools, that have elementary schools, they're all accredited through ISE that I know of. So that's a blessing. It took a lot of work because there's regulations, but it's not all about the United States too. In other countries, it's more complicated. Okay, but it's worth looking into. We should be able to run our own schools.
But doesn't that itself present a problem? Because to get accreditation, you have to follow the rules of the whatever city, the municipality that's accrediting, and sometimes they have rules that prohibit some things that the church might want to.
That's what you'd have to investigate. Yeah.
all the gender and things that,
Well,
you see
yeah.
teachers.
Being in a more conservative area would make it easier, I'm sure. So far around here, we don't, with ISE, there hasn't been, the regulations aren't so tight in this part of the world that we can't run the schools the way we'd want to. Okay.
Madison wasn't worried about accreditation when they were
Sure.
starting.
Yeah. And it was a different world.
Yeah, they weren't worried about
But it's true, in some countries, you may find yourself where the government's not going to allow that. And they're going to, and if you try, they're going to say, you're going to have to do this, this, this. And so that could be a challenge. But
Especially if they're getting funded.
say that again?
They're being funded.
They shouldn't be.
Yeah, see, if once you're funded by the state, you're kind of hopping in bed with them. So it's kind of dangerous there. So worth investigating. Yeah, question?
So when did the transition happen to where we went from calling ourselves a sanitarium to a lifestyle center? And what's the difference? If you could talk
As far as I can tell, like around 1980.
Yeah, it was just keeping up with the time. Sanitarium to most people meant crazy houses,
A place to gain your sanity.
Mixed up
Okay.
sanatorium and sanitarium, so we felt like we should come up with.
Yeah, there's two things. Sanatoriums were places in the country where people went for tuberculosis treatment. They found tuberculosis was helped greatly by being in fresh air out in the country. So there are all of these TB centers. Weimar is at a former tuberculosis treatment area. Okay. So that's one, so what's a sanitarium? Are you a place to treat tuberculosis? Okay. That's one negative. And then the other was sanitarium. Is that a place to gain your sanity? Like, is that an insane asylum? You don't want sanitarium. Well, yeah, the word literally means health place, because the prefix there for, what is it, san or sanit, it means in Latin it's health. Okay, and the sanitarium is just a place. So it's the sanitarium, it's a place of health or a health center.
People just
Okay.
didn't know what it meant.
Yeah. You don't want to have to explain for 5 minutes what the word means. So it was smart, I think, to adjust. To me, I think probably the closest term I think would probably be wellness center, because even lifestyle center is a little misunderstood. Yeah. Wildwood would change. We've talked about changing, but we've got too much identity wrapped into the name Wildwood Lifestyle Center.
We started calling them all lifestyle.
Yeah, right. There's shopping areas that are lifestyle centers. Exactly. And Wildwood Wellness Center just seemed to have too many W's. So, so the name isn't so important. But yeah, I would not recommend using the term sanitarium. There's nothing holy about, the name. All right, so but Madison was also a place to be an example mission center to be replicated, okay? 2 important references on that, so that's one of its purposes. And this is important because Sutherland and McGann, they thought to have a smaller school deeper in the country. They didn't have that vision of making it a normal school. If you remember, the beginning name of Madison was the Nashville Agricultural and Normal Institute, which means like, hey, we don't want to be weird, so we're going to call ourselves a normal institute. I don't know why I didn't think about that. Go ahead, Sylvia. What does normal mean? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So God said, no, you're not only going to be a little country school in the mountains. You're going to be an institute near Nashville, and you're going to train educators that will go around the world. So that's why it was called. If you read the book, A First Draft History of Madison, written by Percy McGann, he would call it Nanny. So he would say the Nanny School. Yeah. So it wasn't. In the beginning, the first 10 years, it wasn't called the Madison School. It was called the Nanny School, which is interesting. It wasn't a purpose acronym, but the Nashville Agricultural and Normal Institute, training teachers that would go out and be self-supporting, having practical skills. They've learned how to work. They've learned how to manage, business. They've learned to be educators, and so it's something that could be replicated. I like Lee's points there. If you heard his earlier lecture, it should be educational, should be evangelistic, it should be sustainable, and thank you. And the point, replicatable. So really, those are really good principles, and that's really what Madison was. In fact, in pamphlet 119, she said, every possible means should be devised to establish schools of the Madison order in various parts of the South. So this was a template. I mean, she started in Avondale, and that was also kind of a template. But now, the efforts were here in the U.S., and Madison was to be an example, a place that could be replicated, and we're training people to go out and start other places like it.
Well, another important fact was it didn't cost a lot for students to go there.
Right, yeah. Although industry and the practicality of it and the self-sustaining spirit, helped the students.
Was allowed to pay, actually. They would have to start their own businesses, and that was the way that they would pay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. From when did that start?
I don't remember. I remember Jose Suazo's History in Madison.
Mm-hmm.
He called that thing that students, they weren't allowed to pay. You have to go there, start your own business, and that was.
What do you mean start their own business? Well, I mean, they had to work in laundry.
An industry on Madison.
Yeah, well, they needed laundry for the sanitarium, so students were working in the laundry, they were working in the kitchen, they were cleaning, they were farming. Yeah.
When I came to Oak Haven in 1973, we didn't pay. I think there was a little at Wildwood and that paid a little, but we worked in the print shop, the sanitarium, the health food store, so that we supported the business that paid. That's the institution.
Yeah, right.
There was only one reason that we were all there. That was to go out and start something.
Right.
Nobody stayed there and lived, and
that's right.
It wasn't a community.
Yeah.
We were only there to go out and do something.
Yep.
And not just health education.
The problem in education today is too expensive. So you can go to school. I mean, if you're going to go, some schools will get you, over $100,000 in debt. If you have $100,000 or more debt, you don't have the same kind of flexibility on the choices that you're going to be making of what you're going to be doing after school, because that interest is going to be accruing on you, right? So that presents a challenge. So these types of schools, the students were to be able to work off their tuition, okay? And so that's the model that I see, and that's what when I was director here at Wild, I said, no student's allowed to leave here in debt. You can't be in debt because you have to work to pay off your tuition before you even, take the course. Yeah, otherwise, because we want you to be totally free to just, when you leave here, you've got training now, you've had some experience now, and you have hopefully no debt from us. Go out and live and be directed as God has led you. So What's that?
We weren't, they didn't take people that had a lot of debt. So, you know.
Oh yeah,
we
take
were
two.
just
Yeah, I
like,
remember. Yeah, even when I first came to Wilder,
I got
though.
a $10
Yeah.
stipend when I got there.
Right.
Okay, the stipend was $10.
Yeah.
You know, so you couldn't come in debt. And they taught
No.
you to pray. Well, what are we going to do about this and this and this? They said, well, this is the time to start praying for your needs,
Yeah.
because when you get out there, that's what you're going to have.
They would ask you in the application if you have debt, right? Even at Wilder, when I came, do you have any debt? That was one of the questions. We need to talk about that because that could be a problem. Yeah, that's true. Very much. So, okay, yeah, good discussion. So the sustainability was very integral to its success and its replication, because you had to establish, you had to be living in a self-sustaining way. The only way you can teach someone, she said, to be self-sustaining is if they are self-sustaining at the school. So if they're learning to work and sustain themselves through through the the work that they were doing there, now when you went out, you're learning that kind of sustainability. So also here, Terry.
I think the point that Sebastian was making was that the students that were there were taught to make their own businesses as well, and to earn their money to pay for their tuition. And that's where all the different industries that were located at Madison came from, because the students themselves started new businesses at that location and generated money.
Yeah, I guess I understood. I haven't seen that. I can't verify or reference it. Because as far as I know, when the students left, they didn't take those businesses with them or sell it to the Institute. So they helped they started departments for Madison and maybe started industry, but it wasn't theirs. Yeah, right. Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, most of the people there were students, so most of the work being done was by students, and they didn't have any furniture, so they had to bake their own. So they started selling furniture. Then furniture was expensive. It was out of, a lot of those industries were out of necessity too. It's like, we don't have enough money to buy it, so we're going to build it our own. So someone says, hey, we can learn how to do that. And so they built it. And I don't know the details of whether they would sell it to the Institute, if a student made furniture, sold it to the Institute that helped pay his tuition, or it just became like an institutional department that they got paid hourly and that went towards their tuition. So those details, I'm not really so sure of how all that went, but the students worked hard. And I think that, to me, it seems like one of the biggest values that they got. They were ready for the trials of the mission field because life was not easy at Madison. Madison was not a place of ease. It was tough. I remember hearing Dr. Sherman, I remember right, she worked at the laundry department at Madison for a while. And laundry is it's kind of a lot of work, even if you have the machines. Okay, no machines, everything by hand, and with all the hydrotherapy and all the sheets and towels that go on. And this is a major thing. So these students were just scrubbing, all day sheets and towels and drying them out. And then, if there's a lot of days of rain and clouds and you're not able to dry it so well, you've got to keep all of this laundry going through a big sanitarium. That was hard work. So it toughened up the students. So, nothing was easy there. And so, when life isn't easy, we grow. And so when they went out to start these other places, they were already used to a hard life and they could manage it. They had some strength behind them. If you have an easy path and everything is handed to you on a silver platter, and you go out and you start facing real challenges, it's going to be some hard learning lessons there. So Madison was a place that prepared people for the mission field. No, it wasn't. And Elder Sutherland was not, he wasn't looking to try to make it easy on him. He understood that. He's like, no, he's not going to go out of his way to make this an easy way. He's like, no, it's good. Take the harder way. It'll only make you stronger. So, okay, let's go to This one, how we're starting to get there. If many more in other schools were receiving a similar training, meaning she had already, in this context, been talking about the importance of scripture, agriculture, construction, and medical missionary work, we as a people would become a spectacle to the world, to angels, to men, and the message would be quickly sent. So the training at Madison, yeah, it was largely threefold. It was agricultural, it was medical missions, and it was teacher training. That was kind of the three kind of triangle that they had. There was the normal training for education, the medical missionary arm, and the industrial, practical, agricultural arm. The training, especially for the medical missionary work, is the one of the grandest objects for which Madison was established. So Madison was there to train medical missionaries, largely. Everyone kind of went through that training so they could use health in their outreach. And the health center was used for also the sustainability, to show how the educational work should blend with the medical work. That was from 11th Manuscripts 195. These are just purposes of Madison. Okay. So now, in the training, what were the students exactly to learn? Just some research on this from first volume, Mind, Character, Personality. Sorry, no, that's not right. MPC. Sorry, don't remember that reference exactly. To have a high and holy aim for their life, so that while they were there, they were taught to learn how to find God's will and how to use their talents for the highest and holiest purposes to obtain an exalted understanding of true education. These were some of the core principles taught to the Madison students. To seek higher education, which is entire conformity to the will of God. So learning how to find God's will in their life and learning to live a life of service, a life with practicality. They were learning practical knowledge in agriculture, construction, care of stock, meaning cattle. They had a dairy farm there, so they're working with a lot of animals. They learned that. Even Wildwood in the beginning had milking cows here. Early Wildwood students. Wildwood really only became like vegan, or I think in the 70s was my understanding. Before that, it was milking the cows at 5 a.m. I don't think there was not as many as Madison. Madison had a sizable dairy industry, and their cows were so well cared for that they were on the highest levels of milk production per heads of cattle, which was really impressive. And the agricultural leaders, especially in the early 10 years, were so strong that they were speaking at government meetings in Nashville on agriculture. They were some of the leading agricultural minds in Tennessee. I forget what the man's name that was like one of the head farmers at Madison, but he was invited. Percy McGann wrote about it in that little book, First Draft. There was like 400 people listening to his lecture in Tennessee about, how he's so successful with agriculture. People were listening to them, and they saw the success of the Madison farm. It was a huge, example of agriculture. So students were there learning that. They're learning how to take care of animals, agriculture. They've had to learn construction, all of that, because the balance of developing the mind and the physicality and the body needed to be blended, and that was helping develop strong characters and great students. And of course, everything based in Scripture. The Bible was the foundation of everything there at the Madison School. And from fifth manuscript release, especially, not only how to take care of animals, but how to take care of people. So they were learning how to treat and care for the sick and the injured. There's a couple of references. If you want these notes, you could look at some of these resources and learn more about the Madison School. Another really important principle of this that I noticed was the principle of active perseverance. That is something that was taught. That's what we've been talking about. The active perseverance, I guess, would be through those trials and through that hard life. Much depends upon your laying your plans according to the word of the Lord and with persevering energies to go ahead. Now notice, more depends upon active perseverance than upon genius and book knowledge. So to have a mindset that you're not going to give up easily, that you're going to go forward until you're successful. And if you feel God has called you to something, that you're going to put forth your utmost energies towards that. And regardless of the trials that you face, you can't learn that by studying books. They learned that when they were in the fields. They learned that in these departments. They learned that when they were working, that if they were going to achieve what they wanted to achieve, they had to persevere. And that active perseverance made them, they were ready now. When they left, they're like, they've been through it. And so now they're ready to, learning that to be persevering is one of the most important principles that we can teach at these schools. Yeah, now this is the last point, I believe. So in addition to the manual work and the knowledge of books, which of course they did study as well, and learn the sciences and how to be teachers. I mean, it was a teacher training. They were also doing a lot of education there. But there was a spiritual emphasis and a ministry emphasis from 8th manuscript release that they were learning at this school to do justly, to love mercifully, and to walk humbly with God. So they were very involved in outreach and evangelism, and they were learning to be Christians, right? Very giving people, very loving people, and very good. All right, we're kind of running out of time here, but students were to learn from teachers with experience who have in the past accomplished a great and good work and who have suffered privations for the cause of God. So Madison was strong because they had strong leaders, strong teachers, and those teachers were chosen not if they were inexperienced. They had to be people of experience and people that have even gone through trials. Well, E.A. Sutherland would be one of them, right? Been through a lot of trials and difficulties, and that's how they felt like people were kind of ready. They've been through some experience. How to go out and start another mission project similar to the one at Madison. Well, we've repeated that actually. So the replication of Madison was very important, and the health food manufacturing. That was one of the things that they were learning, taking with them. Because you not only have the agriculture, but to have that food preservation and then make a business out of it and be able to sell those health foods and sustain and feed your product. I read through a list of how much they canned one year. It was impressive. It's like 5,000 quarts of pears and peaches and tomatoes. And I don't know what that room would have looked like, but they could fill this entire parlor here full of canned food. So that was all food that they grew. So they sold health foods, but they also were sustained by it. So when the Great Depression hit of the 30s, they just went to their canned foods, and the farmers there, they weren't affected by it. They weren't really relying on Foods of Life trucks coming in and delivering food to them. Anyway, they were very self-sustaining.
They shone at that time.
What's that?
They shone at that time.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually their highlight. It was like, it just rose to the surface. The importance of living in self-sustaining ways really shined in a dark period. Could that be the same in the future? Are there difficult times coming to God's people and to this earth? We don't know how soon. It could be very soon that tremendous challenges come to us. There could be another huge depression. There could be greater pestilences, more disasters, economic downfalls, and so forth. Food shortages. If God's people would heed to this message of moving out of the cities, living in the country, learning to be more sustainable, learning to be surrounded with God's creation, committed to prayer and study and, the practicality and the sustainability of country life, we'll be in a much stronger position to endure that. We've also seen that the Outpost Center work is crucial to the success of our evangelistic work worldwide. It's a major part of our work, and we need revival on it. So outposts that are outside the city, but in easy access, not too far, with the purpose of reaching those populations, places of healing, places of education, places of agriculture and industry, where people can come and learn and support themselves through those industries and work and learn how to be more sustainable. This is an important part of God's work in these last days. And really, we need it now more than ever. In one of those statements, especially about the pestilences, the the impending destruction of the cities, it says this will become, the outposts will become more and more important the more and more the end comes, because of, in the context of, the collapse of the world around us. So the Outpost Center seems like there was a big revival of it to Seventh-day Adventists in the early part of the 20th century, but we kind of lost track of it along the way a bit. And so we're not nearly where God would have us. But it's not time to forget about it. It's more important now than it ever was. It's far more important now than it was in the year 1900 or 1904. Because the cities are getting larger, they are getting more corrupted, the world is just full of corruption and pollution, and we have these, the end is coming soon, judgments are going to be coming on these cities. We desperately need to be reaching these cities, but again, not by living in them. So this is a really important message, I think, that we have to carry, and Seventh-day Adventists need this message, because if you were to survey most Seventh-day Adventists around the world, they may have never heard of almost anything that we talked about this whole last hour. Okay, so there's a great work to be done, and God will help us. As Pavel Goya has been inspiring us, it may be impossible, and actually God is giving us impossible tasks, but He's given impossible tasks in the past too. And so, what can God do? We just can only be faithful and prayerful, and let ourselves be used by God. Yes, Heather.
There are seminars encouraging people to get out of the cities, but they're encouraging people to go off the grid. And there's a lot of people up our way
Okay.
that came to go off the grid.
Yeah.
And they give up and they end up back in the city.
Yeah.
Either you have high skills or high money to go off the grid. And because we have people living in Cookville who've been trying to get on their land for 5, 10, 8 years, because they're starting from scratch building.
Yeah.
And Tennessee is beautiful, but it's rocky. It has sulfur water. I mean, it's
the soil's not always so great. Yeah.
So what do you
Right.
think about, do you promote getting off the grid? Because I see more disasters than success with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of other counsels of not being hasty and rushing to the country if you're not prepared for it. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I wouldn't counsel someone to, you see seedy people launching out in these country properties. They don't know what they're doing. I don't know. So, yeah, Grandma.
Bible statement, he that is faithful as that which is least is faithful also in much. We need to learn that.
Yes. So starting with small beginnings is probably a good idea. Getting some experience before launching out too far, not being hasty, being prayerful, making sure God is leading you. It might be good to volunteer at some country ministry for a while to just so you at least know what it's like. Some country city people come even to Wildwood and they're like, oh, they're scared of even going outside because there's bugs out there and stuff. It's like, whoa, you've got a, you don't know what country is. I mean, we're not even far out in the country here. So we've got paved roads around here. So, yeah, Sebastian.
About what you said about knowing about supporting centers. I'm from Chile.
Yeah.
And my whole life, I never heard about this thing.
Yeah.
And when I knew about it when I was like 23, I was like, what in the world? Like supporting what? And then it was a whole parallel dimension that I was seeing that I never knew about.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of people that don't know.
Yes.
And they're willing to work for the Lord, but they just don't know how to. They just think that they need to work for the church,
Yes.
And we need to get the message out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people you're right. I mean, they'll just get blown away by some of these concepts, and it's like a different world in Adventism. Like, I didn't even know this existed. It's hard for me to, this is the only part of the church that I even knew, because I got brought in the church through supporting ministries. Then you meet Adventists that have never even heard of any of ASI, OCI, any of these projects. So there's a great work of education to be done, and God is opening up opportunities, and the church is more open now than maybe ever before. I mean, the General Conference, many of the leaders there they just believe in this message, and they know that there's got to be more education, and they're just encouraging us to do what we need to do, because, so let's get busy. Thank you so much for being here. Of course, there's a lot more that could be said, but if you have any questions, you could ask. If you want the notes, free to share them. But let's have a prayer before we go. Our Father, it's exciting, Lord, to hear such clear testimonies. You've given us a plan. You've given us direction. We don't need to come up with our own wisdom. Of course, we need to look for ways to apply these principles and be led by your Spirit. And the world is so different today than 120 years ago when a lot of these places were getting started. It's a lot of challenges. But we just pray that your Spirit would guide us, because we don't believe you'd cast aside this work. You've told us it's even more important the closer we get to the end. And but there's such a great work to be done, and inspiring and educating and doing ourselves, and not forgetting to evangelize these cities. We can get so focused on our country living and our sustainability and living off the grid and everything, and totally forget the mission of it all. So help us to keep that mission focus and to be led by you. And just thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your love. And we just ask for your Spirit to be with us and with this whole convention, that we'd be revived and inspired to give our hearts more fully to you. And we just ask for this, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thank you all very much.